I understand I have two 15-minute sessions a day because I would go for matching rates, and my rate is American $4,500 every 15 minutes, and I'm worth it. I'm going to be calling you Baranina. It's as close as I know how to say it. I don't have a real understanding of how to say it appropriately, but until further notice, that's how I'm going to refer to you, and that's how I'm going to seek you out. Baranina. I've just read the elements of the Belarusian constitution specific to the judicial branch. I've not read further than that, but I have read up until then. And I've held off on reading the elements of the constitution concerning the judicial branch today. I did this out of respect and a sense of collegiality. I understand, constitutionally speaking, you are required to have a degree in order to be eligible in the judicial branch as part of the Constitution. I do not have a degree myself. I'm not barred or licensed to practice law, but I am in a course of action in the United States where I believe that there has been substantial corruption that has infiltrated all of the branches of government, really, but specifically the judicial branch of government, all the way up until the Supreme Court of the United States. This constitutes a national security threat and an international security alarm, actually. I understand it is not unique, that there is a very serious problem with judicial corruption globally, and that in the areas of the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe specifically, there has been efforts to address this, including at some of the highest levels of government countries that themselves are in the course of trying to address corruption. And I'm concerned that there is a sort of praxis through which this corruption is effectuated that is done under the guise of fighting corruption. This is one of the major challenges I'm facing, is that so-called anti-corruption movements are themselves, it seems, a front actually involved in laundering money in connection with organized crime that's infiltrated other parts of the government. In the United States, the amount of people that have a background in the law and have first encountered government through the judicial branch of government and then have moved on to the legislative and even executive branches of government, both in the federal level and the state level, has created a sort of gridlock when it comes to being able to access rights to due process for regular people or for other people in the United States. I think it's a great disservice to see people involved in the practice of law outside of the operationalization of the law as a branch of government. They are government officials. They are affiliated and constitutionally beholden to the government, including in their role of being an advocate or in representing the people. And so when they engage knowingly and willingly in criminal activities of their own, and especially if they're doing it in a capacity where they are trying to represent to other people that they are representing the interests of clients who themselves might be implicated in crime, then they are potentially involved in a very serious slander on the people of the United States. If they have a client that is implicated in crime, then everybody has a right to a defense. But that does not give you a right to say you're a criminal or an otherwise defense lawyer. So you're entitled to engage in crime as part of your representative role. I'm concerned that there's actually a cultural problem. That part of what has happened is there has been some sort of inclination that somehow legal professionals in the form of lawyers are actually the benchmark reference when it comes to the judicial branch of government. There is precedent, and there's actually been dispute at the level of the Supreme Court of the United States that says it's not. It is actually the jury. It is actually the people and our capacity to serve as jurists, including in exercise of our constitutional rights to be a part of a jury and or to have a trial by a jury of our peers. So this brings into consideration a very significant matter. In what way are we regarded as peers, and how do we regard others as peers? And so this is pretty much where I understand myself to be as somebody that's been completely denied any access to due process. And the only time I've ever been provided with any professional representation was in, it turns out, an act of serious fraud. That I was represented by a lawyer in a case that was supposedly about a medical claim, and that is not at all what it was about. As a matter of fact, the one time I've ever been provided with actual legal representation is actually indicative of and revelatory of a conspiracy, a serious conspiracy. At the time, the specific contract to commit to that specific element of the conspiracy was in effect. But it was attempting to claim assets and have them identified as a medical malady during a time frame before when that specific contract was in effect. So, in some ways, what I need is some collegial consideration regarding these concepts of contract and specifically how legislation is a form of contract, and specifically consideration of legislation as a form of contract that is subordinate to the Constitution as a contract. You know, this is not an argument that I personally have seen much on in the United States from that perspective, i.e., there are different constitutional considerations regarding the primacy of certain kinds of contracts. Specifically, the Constitution of Texas discusses the capacity to engage contract, but also impedance of contract. However, the specific argument of the Constitution as a contract is, to me, a very important matter for consideration. And specifically, that it is a contract with the people. It is not a contract with individuals who are holding government positions. It's a contract with the people. And so that those that are in performance of government office are beholden to uphold that contract with an understanding it is with the people. And so from this perspective, I believe that we are at a situation where the efforts to defraud the people of the United States have had a material impact on people in other countries. Even though we only met for a brief period of time, it was during a time frame wherein matters related to my life and my situation, including my investigations at that time and my offer to provide an affidavit in an ongoing litigious proceeding, intersected with yours at a time frame during which, regardless of what the actual status was that you were dealing with legally, has had long-term material implications in my life, and I believe that it's actually part of a larger nexus of events that are going on globally, i.e. both of us have been intentionally dispossessed of our capacities to be availed of our constitutional rights, both within the United States and also in consideration that the United States has international treaties around mutual cooperation, including in criminal matters, and that there are also other international treaties, including in regards to very high-level matters that have international security implications, up to and including weapons, as well as up to and including in consideration of addressing acts of money laundering, including money laundering that could aid and abet acts of terrorism, as well as providing for the security of people in order to be able to have access to constitutional due process in accordance with where they are and where they're coming from. Other sorts of non-legalistic issues are hopefully something that will unfold moving forward to the best of our capacities to communicate. I do not speak any Russian or Belarusian. I am a sole English language speaker. Sometimes I'm okay at Spanish. My Latin is actually pretty good, right? But in regards to trying to make this initial formal overture to try to actually reconnect with you and to actually have some sort of momentum to move forward, especially with an understanding that there are efforts to try to misabuse and misrepresent people through their electronic representation, and that there are efforts to attempt to compel people to engage in illegal and or illicit finance just to get their basic needs met. I don't think that this is a time for any of us to shy away from dealing with them directly and literally, and that actually attempting to allow for it to be abstracted has been proven in more than 5 years to have been a great disservice to all involved. So I'm going to start there. I am on the record. My last name is Crouse, Crouse. First name Charity, Charity. Middle name Colleen, Colleen. I have submitted a number of filings in the state of Texas through the Texas state of Texas Supreme Court system. I also have filings online. If you have access to any of the district court databases, you would be able to find cases that are in my name. They are petitions either in my name as the petitioner or as what would be listed as the plaintiff in the various cases of concern. I have attempted to bring attention to what I understand to be a serious crime involving abuse of office, including of the federal legislature in regards to manipulation of the appropriations process. And this has created a serious crisis that we're dealing with right now, not only domestically but internationally. As a matter of fact, I've been trying since 2017 to get to the Supreme Court of the United States to acknowledge and accept that it has the capacity, the right, and the power, as well as I believe the constitutional duty, to provide a check against abuse by the legislative branch when it comes to failure to perform its duties in accordance with the revenue elements of the legislature, including processes regarding taxation, but also the power of appropriation. And that insofar as the legislature has been abusing the appropriations process in matters that I believe and have demonstrated actually constitute a pattern of racketeering activity, that at this point, without any intercession, constitutionally speaking, and we are actually at a situation where the only recourse we have is to exercise our option to alter or abolish the government in a variety of manners that we have at our disposal. And the serious implications are that there has been an effort to compel people to engage in acts of sedition in accordance with co-conspiring with infiltrators of the government that themselves are engaged in acts of sedition. And just for the record, there is a distinction, I believe, a material distinction, and understand legally there is a distinction between sedition and treason. Sedition is, I have charged sedition because the understanding is that there is an active effort to undermine the appropriate and proper functioning of the government, including in manners that are legally connected to currently existing legislation around sedition, specifically when it comes to influencing the loyalty and morale of the armed services, but also in connection with war bonds and fraud involving war bonds, including past war bonds, and also refusal to acknowledge the current material conditions while in the course of issuing bonds, including bonds that I believe they understand are not sustainable. They are intentionally issuing bonds knowing they cannot cover them, and they have every intention of defaulting. And by precedent that they have set in the last 30 years, including during the 2008 banking bailout, and including during the more recent time frame, as has been demonstrated not just through the legislature, but all the way up into the Supreme Court of the United States, they have every intention of making the people of the United States, pay for that fraud and that crime that's getting covered up by people that have infiltrated the government. That completely abrogates their position as representatives of the people and is a flagrant violation of the Constitution and constitutes a breach of contract with the people, a breach of contract with deadly consequences. And so it cannot be sustained. In any country that would allow for a representation of this country as being under those terms, I contend it's potentially a co-conspirator against their own people. And so that's one of the reasons why I am reaching out to you directly in this manner. My understanding is that by virtue of being within the continental or the territorial boundaries of the United States of America, but having been born in another country, there is a different positioning you may well have, but the history of the United States is founded on an understanding that most of what constitutes, or as I acknowledged as the United States of America, was comprised of people that were born or had their lineage and origin outside of this area, and were either seeking some sort of political independence in some way to live a dignified life outside of their understanding of being subjected to tyranny, and or were part of systematologies that brought them over under duress and in manners that did not expect initially for them to know emancipation. They had to fight it out once they got here in one way or another. Sometimes it took a protracted period of time for that fight to be able to come to a certain resolution. And we also understand that there were people that were already here, including many different kinds of people, some of whom knew peace with each other and others who had known war with each other for a very substantial amount of time. So it is both a country of people born here, but it's also a country of people that become born here. And so my understanding is that we're kind of in a process of potential rebirth if we understand and see it as that manner. But it is too late in the time frames we are in to allow the status quo to persist. I contend that what has happened in the month of June thus far has been not only completely undermining of what is actually true about and honest about the people of the United States, but is also potentially co-conspiring with slander against peoples all over the world. So I hope you find this I hope you find a way to contact me. If not, please keep a record. And so when we are able to actually have direct communication, we can see what we've been doing concurrently and to see if they meet up and if that actually is complementary. On the other hand, if you have another understanding of the distinction, specifically in regards to the profundity here, I will say I do not consider this about aiding and abetting or providing aid and comfort to enemies of the United States.